Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Rabbi Menachem Bloch, the spiritual leader of Chabad of Plano, Collin County, to the stage.
L'chaim. Welcome and good evening. Upon entering the gates of Auschwitz, every prisoner destined for forced labor was greeted with a needle and ink. With these simple instruments, the Nazis erased the individuality of the person before them, turning them into a faceless number. In one of the Bible's most memorable moments, God tells Abraham, "I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars of the heaven and the sands of the seashore." Why the two metaphors? A single grain of sand has no value, but combined with thousands of others, it can become a golden beach or a complex computer chip. Stars, on the other hand, are individuals. Each is a powerful source of light that illuminates the universe. Teach the world, God tells Abraham, that people possess both qualities. Like the sand, we become larger only when we connect with others, with family and community. At the same time, we are likened to the stars. Each unique individual has their own story, a light and warmth that only they can share with this world. God's message to Abraham is the rejection of the Nazis' ink. The individual is divine. We are not the same. We are not just a number. Yes, we are driven by diverse aspirations and needs, yet that which divides us is as divine as that which unites us. Every Sunday from 1986 to 1992, thousands of people of every color and creed flocked to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the leader of the global Chabad movement in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, seeking blessing and counsel. To each, the Rebbe gave a dollar bill that they would later donate to charity. Well into his 80s, the Rebbe would stand for 7-8 hours straight. Once an elderly woman could not contain herself and burst out, "Rebbe, how do you do it? Rebbe, how do you not tire?" The Rebbe smiled and said, "Every soul is a diamond. Can one grow tired of counting diamonds?" This has been the work of Chabad across the world, to reinvigorate the divine spark that lies within each person so that their soul can begin to shine. I would like to take a moment, together with my wife Rifki and my colleagues in the audience, to welcome the leaders and the visionaries of Chabad in the DFW area, Rabbi Mendel and Bela Dubrovsky. Over the past 34 years, they have overseen the establishment of 9 centers that are dedicated to this holy work. May all our efforts continue to grow and flourish. Tonight, we celebrate the sanctity of our community's diversity. This evening was made possible by a broad array of institutions from across our community, each a star with a mandate and vision of their own, who came together to create an evening that champions the value of the individual. As we listen to Eva's message tonight, let us commit to leaving with more open hearts. If we can nurture a hope for a better tomorrow by adding in acts of goodness and kindness, we will live to see the fulfillment of the Song of Hope, composed on that cattle car so many years ago. Ani ma'amin, I believe, with perfect faith in the coming of a time when we will see the good and the divine in each other, when there will be no more war but peace, no more jealousy but love. May it come speedily in our times, and let us say, Amen.
Please welcome Dr. Carrie Israel, President Emeritus of Collin College, to the stage.
Hello, everyone. I had a hard time on the steps because I have a size 16 shoe. It doesn't fit on the steps. Okay. I need a l'chaim myself. Where is one? I'd like to welcome and thank all of you for coming to this historic evening. You are really beautiful people, and I'm grateful for your presence. It's important. Thank you. Give yourself a round of applause. Thank you for coming. Tonight's event is historic in that there's 1,550 people here. We're sold out. We had to turn people away, which was too bad. I tried to sell my seat for $4,000. But what's unique about this crowd is the very diverse backgrounds and the diverse groups that have come together to listen to someone who knew Anne Frank personally and who survived Auschwitz. Also, everyone here should have a tribute book. I'm supposed to hold it up. You should have one. Don't look at it right now. I want you to listen to me. Now, this has been distributed. It's a special keepsake. It really is. A lot of time and effort went into it. It lists the wonderful sponsors of the event, but on the left side of each page in the tribute book, you can read a short biographical sketch of the men, women, and children who perished in the Holocaust or who survived its horror. We call this a world of loss. May their memories be a blessing. On the right side of each page, you can read stories that reflect the best of humanity, stories told of otherwise ordinary people who stepped up to be heroes. And again, we label this a world of hope. May they be an inspiration to us all. I hope you take time to read and cherish this journal. I think it's very important. I'd like to, and I'll do it quickly, but I would like to mention individually, and they're in the book though, the journal, the major donors. First of all, visionary Bernie and Leslie Fiwis. We'll hold our applause till the end, but for the visionaries, you can applaud now. The builders are Robert Gartner, Central Market, HEB, and me. The benefactors are Legacy Texas, Independent Bank, Michael and Michelle Ray, Karen Glanger and family, Howard and Florence Shapiro and family, Gary and Benita Gluckman, Stuart Margol Companies, Mark Siegel, Barry and Julie Adler, Israel Natalia Kantarski, I'm a Nemirotsky, I should know this, Kantarski, the Kraus family, okay, Kyle and Karen Rovinsky, Hoffman, Kelly Lopez, LLP, Paul and Stacy Rubin, A Taste of the World, 2 anonymous donors. And I would also like to thank, and it's been on the screens, all the generous partners and friends. And I have to acknowledge tonight our community partners, because that's real important. So I thank Plano ISD Council PTAs, the Frisco ISD Council of PTAs, Yavana Academy, UNT at Frisco, the University of Texas at Dallas, SMU, and the Dallas Holocaust Museum Center, and we welcome President CEO Mary Pat Higgins here tonight. We urge you to visit the current Anne Frank exhibit at the Holocaust Center. I would also like, and it's dear to me, the Holocaust survivors over there who have come out here tonight, and we're appreciated that you're here. Wave your hand, come on, you're over on the left. Thank you for being here. Thank you. And for all those Holocaust deniers, may they have stomach aches tonight. Okay. I'd like to thank the media sponsors, Texas Jewish Post and Good Life Family. And lastly, we could not have accomplished this monumental event without the event chairs, Marla Buskin, Karen Glanger, Benita Gluckman, Sharona Ohayan, Cheryl Pigeon. Yes, women have power. Oh, thank you. Let's give them all a round of applause. And now it's my distinct pleasure to say a few words about our fabulous honoree, Sanjeev Yajnik, who's the president of Financial Services Division within Capital One, which has become one of the largest auto lenders in the United States. Additionally, Sanjeev leads Capital One's community and civic activities throughout Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana. You can certainly read his bio in the tribute book, his unique background, his extensive civic involvement, and many successes. He is being honored for his outstanding passion and dedication to the betterment of our communities and his tremendous leadership. I had the opportunity to work with him when he formed the important Collin County Business Alliance, and when we held at Collin College the first education summit for the entire region. These initiatives have had a lasting and important impact for our communities and countless thousands of individuals. More importantly, I'm impressed by his commitment to diversity, his generosity, his integrity, his trustworthiness, his kindness, his vision, his intellect. I don't say this lightly. I'm honored to know him, and I'm honored to learn from him. He is the type of inspirational leader we need in this world. And so thus, we are honoring Sanjeev, and if he could join me and Rabbi Block up on this stage, I would appreciate it. Sanjeev, Rabbi.
This unique presentation, which is a reflection of the diversity and the sense of community that Sanjeev represents, reads as follows. Sanjeev Yajnik, with abiding respect for your vision, outstanding passion, and dedication to the betterment of our communities. Your unwavering commitment to nurturing the leaders of tomorrow with respect and dignity inspires us all. Chabad of Plano, Collin County, March 27th, 2019.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, we don't dance that well together, but I am indeed humbled, Dr. Israel, Rabbi Block, and ladies and gentlemen, I'm very humbled by getting this honor. Hopefully, I will continue to work hard to deserve it, but I'm really humbled today. But I thought I'd just share a very, very few words with you. I grew up in Calcutta, in India, and I just want to take you back to when I was in the 4th grade. And we had a person who would come to school. I went to school, St. Xavier's in Calcutta. And we had a person who would come to our school every week, and she was like an aunt to us growing up. This was what was normal for us. So she was an aunt, she was small, she was determined, and her name at that time was Sister Teresa, later Mother Teresa. And so every Thursday we would go to Shishu Bhavan, which is, it's an orphanage in Calcutta. And growing up as a young boy, I mean, that's what you know. We used to go, and then we used to serve some food to the boys and girls there, and then we would come back. So now this one day when I was 4 years old, we went to Shishu Bhavan, and I was serving food to a boy around my age. And I tripped, and he tripped, and we fell down on the ground. And we were on the ground, and I was looking into his eyes. We were maybe 6 or 8 inches apart. And it felt to me that it was an eternity, and that I knew that I was looking at myself. That boy was me. And after getting up, we brushed each other off, and I went home, and I started asking my mother a whole bunch of questions. I said, why was I born where I was born? Why is he born where he is born? What did he do to deserve to be there? Why am I here with parents? What happened to his parents? And by the way, over the next many years, I drove my parents completely nuts, because I used to bring people home, and they used to tell me, no, you're studying that, but you're not supposed to bring everyone, you see. But you know, the big thing for me at that time was we were actually the same person. And we are all the same person. At the end of the day, we are all the same. And I had made up my mind that I would work really hard throughout my life to make sure that I spend time connecting, that we would need to, in our great situations that we are in right now, that we want to give back. And very importantly, we want to connect with everyone, because we are the same. So it is on this wonderful evening, and we're going to hear from an amazing person. I can't wait to hear from her and what she has to say. We just met her over dinner. But I am truly humbled to be receiving this award. But all I can tell you is we are lucky to be where we are. And together we can make an incredible difference. Thank you.
Please welcome Mabry Jackson, Honorary Consul to the Netherlands and Director of Public Affairs, Central Market and HEB.
Good evening. I believe I was in the 5th grade when I read 2 books that provided my first glimpse into the presence of evil in the world. The first one was The Diary of Anne Frank. And the second one was Corrie ten Boom's story, The Hiding Place. These 2 books carved a very special place in my heart at a very, very young age for the victims and the survivors of the Holocaust and their families. Last year, several members of the audience and I accompanied Dr. Rick Halperin from SMU on a week-long journey through Germany's death camps. As we listened to the accounts from the Holocaust at each location, and we went to 17 locations in a week. There's a lot of death that week. We acknowledged not only the importance of these stories, but the resiliency of the spirit as the world continues to grapple with intolerance and horrific human rights violations. Tomorrow morning in Washington, D.C., the Dutch Embassy will hold its annual Anne Frank Awards ceremony, which honors those who confront intolerance, anti-Semitism, racism, and discrimination while upholding freedom and equal rights to promote an open, pluralistic, and democratic society. This year's award recipient is Mr. Benjamin Ferencz. He's the last surviving prosecutor of the Nuremberg trials. On behalf of the partners of Central Market HEB and the Netherlands Consulate General in Miami, I am so honored to be here this evening to introduce our inspirational speaker, Ms. Eva Schloss, Holocaust survivor and the stepsister of Anne Frank. It's just remarkable to have her here with us tonight to share her personal stories about Anne and recount her own wartime experiences as an Auschwitz survivor. Born in Austria, Ms. Schloss's family immigrated to Belgium and then to Holland, where her family was forced into hiding for 2 years before their betrayal and subsequent capture by the Nazis. They were then sent to Auschwitz-Birkenau death camp. Ms. Schloss and her mother survived. Her father and her brother did not. Ms. Schloss has shared her story at more than 1,000 speaking engagements around the world. She's written 3 books, and she's even had a play written about her life. Ms. Schloss, your presence here tonight in North Texas shows how the words of a very young girl who died tragically 8 decades ago still speaks volume today. It shows that we must all take active steps to remember the horrors of the Holocaust and to teach our younger generations about the tragedies of World War II so history does not repeat itself. Leading our conversation tonight is Mark Elfenbein, affectionately known to ESPN listeners as Elf. Mark has been a radio and TV personality for more than 25 years. So Mark, we're delighted to have you here tonight. And now on behalf of Central Market HEB and the Netherlands Consul General in Miami, it is my honor to present Ms. Eva Schloss.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Good evening. How's everybody doing? Eva?
We are doing all right, thank you.
You and I just met not too long ago. How was dinner?
Very nice, very nice. I met some wonderful people and had a good meal. So I'm strong enough to speak now.
Fantastic. Well, let me begin by thanking you once again for being here tonight. It's remarkable what you have done in your lifetime, the zest and the fire that you bring, and your remarkable story that you can tell the world is something that I know everybody here tonight has been looking forward to and hearing all your stories. So ladies and gentlemen, once again, Eva Schloss.
Thank you.
There's so much to cover. There's so much to talk about. And I know myself...
You might be here till 11 o'clock.
Just seeing the video at the beginning, you've seen it a million times. You lived it. What goes through your mind when you watch it again and again?
Each time I see it, first of all, the music goes right through you, but as well the facts that human beings were able to do this to other human beings, you know, treating them worse than cattle is something which we really can't comprehend.
Let's go back to where it began. It makes sense to start at the beginning, your childhood, where you grew up, and how you traveled throughout. Tell us a little bit about that.
Through Europe. Well, as you have heard, I was born in Vienna, which was a beautiful city with a lot of culture, but as well wonderful scenery, mountains and lakes. And I was born in a very young, happy family. I had very young parents. I married. My mother was 18, my father 21. I had an older brother, 3 years older. We had grandparents, aunt, uncles. My family had been in Austria for centuries. And we felt part of the population. So we were, of course, a Jewish family. And what was different from America, for instance, in Germany and Austria, you had to have religious education in school. So I think in my class, when I was 6 years old, there were about 7 Jewish children. And twice a week we were called out, and we had in another classroom Jewish education, which meant the Old Testament, Bible stories, but as well the festivals. And then we went back to our class, so it meant that everybody knew who was a Jew. And in April 1938, Hitler and his army just marched into Austria without being invited, without asking permission. And suddenly the Austrians, you know, there was probably hidden anti-Semitism, but it was certainly not in the open. But suddenly all our friends and everybody became horrible, horrible, horrible Nazis. They stood in the street. Suddenly they all had swastika flags waving and Heil Hitler salute and shouting and shouting and shouting. And Jewish people knew what had happened already in Germany by 1938. And we just looked behind the curtains, very, very scared. My brother, who was 12 years old, he came home from school the next day, and his clothes were torn, he was full of blood, and my parents in shock asked him, "Heinz, what on earth has happened to you?" And he said, "My own friends did that, and the teachers just watched it happening." So from one day to the next, the atmosphere changed completely. My father was somehow clever enough, he must have had prepared that, and escaped within a few days to Netherlands, to Holland, where he had business contact. He had a shoe factory, which he had inherited from his father, and he had done business with the Netherlands.
You knew Anne Frank already as a child, and I guess that was at the age of 11, if I'm not mistaken. Tell us a little bit about her and what was your relationship that had to be incredible.
Became, of course, very important later. Well, we eventually, my mother and my brother and me escaped to Belgium, where we were not welcomed. We were really treated as dirty foreigners, and I had to learn the language. I lost all my joie de vivre. I became very shy, and in the meantime, Hitler carried on with his conquering of Europe. He went into Czechoslovakia, into Poland, and the Second World War started. We were still living in 2 different countries, and my father tried desperately to get a visa for us to come to Holland as well. And in February 1940, he got a visa for us to visit him for 3 months. So he hired a furnished apartment. You know, when you left the country, you were not allowed to take anything with you, just a tiny suitcase with a few of your clothes. It was even searched at the border, so you couldn't smuggle any jewelry or money or anything like that. So we were actually quite poor, and as I say, we couldn't take any furniture, so this was a furnished apartment which belonged actually to a non-Jewish person who had bought it from a Jewish woman who had lived there, but she had been able to go to her son in Switzerland. And so this was an open square with apartments on both sides. And when you have no yard and in apartments, all the children in the neighborhood after school came out to play on this open space. If you ever go to Amsterdam, have a look at it, because it's still looking very, very similar. Only there's now a statue of Anne there in the middle of this open space. And so one day, a little girl came to me. We were both 11 at the time, and introduced herself, said her name was Anne Frank, and she asked where I came from. I said, from Austria. So she said, well, I take you up to my apartment. You can meet my dad, who can speak German. She came already to Holland when she was 4 years old. Otto Frank, who later became my stepfather, told us very often he left Germany. Again, he was an officer in the First World War, and he said his family had been like the Rothschilds there already since 1500, and he felt through and through German. But he realized when he saw the Nazis, there's a very famous Nazi song, which goes, when Jewish blood drips from our knives, life is going to be good again. He said, when I heard this and saw the hatred of those young Nazi boys singing this, I realized this is not a country where I want to bring up my family. So Anne had no scruples. She had not experienced anti-Semitism. She was very happy in the Netherlands, learned the language, of course, very quick. And so we became friends. After school, we were playing there, hopscotch and skipping, all the things which you did at the time. There were no mobile phones or anything like that. And Anne was very, very good in storytelling. At school, she had to stay behind always because she was big chatterbox. She had to write 100 lines. I'm not going to talk so much in class. But she just couldn't help it. She came out of school, amassed a group of kids, and started to talk and talk and talk again. So she was quite popular. And when she asked me about my family, I told her I had an older brother. She said, oh, when can I come to your apartment to meet him? But he was not really interested in a little girl the age of his old little sister, you know, much more immature. But and in a diary, she writes quite a bit about her different boyfriends. Yeah, so in Holland, the Dutch people were quite different from Belgium. They welcomed us. They said, you are one of us now. I looked actually with blonde hair and blue-eyed. You look like a real Dutch girl, and Hollands meisje. And I got a bicycle, and we settled down quite happily. Unfortunately, it didn't last very long. In May, in the night, we heard shooting and the sound of aeroplanes, and we put on the radio, and we heard terrible news. The German army is trying to invade our country. But don't worry, we are going to fight the Germans. When Holland is a very, very small country, never having expected they would go into a war, because in the First World War, it's very, very flat, and it lies actually below sea level. So it is surrounded with dikes. So when the Germans in the First World War tried to march in, they opened some of the dikes and flooded the countries. So the Germans left Holland and went into Belgium. So a lot of Jewish people who had fled to Holland thought Holland will stay out of the war again. But the war had drastically changed. First of all, the Germans landed with aeroplanes and with parachutes behind the flooded water. And as well, it was the first time in this war that a civilian city had been bombed. Rotterdam, second biggest city, a harbor, and there were 10,000 casualties. And the Germans warned, if you're not going to capitulate, we are going to start to bomb more of your cities. Well, the government couldn't risk that, of course. The other thing was the Dutch royal family, quite popular at the time, fled to first to England and then later to Canada, which was very discouraging for the population. But you know, you had to make choices. most choices were bad. The Belgian king, they were invaded after Holland, thought he will stay and he will try to get a better deal for his population. After the war, he had to abdicate and he was treated as a traitor. So, you know, every choice you made was the wrong choice. Like we tried to still escape to England, but it was too late. So we were trapped.
When the invasion came, and obviously we all know about the invasion, can you tell us, I mean, none of us can even imagine, when you were put into hiding and you had to go into hiding, tell us what was that like?
Well, for 2 years, things wasn't too bad. You know, there were measures against Jewish people. We were not allowed on public transport. We had to stay in at 8 o'clock, and we had to wear the yellow star. We were not allowed, it became worse and worse. We were not allowed to go to cinemas or to theaters. We were special bans. It was sort of like an apartheid. But it became slowly, slowly life-threatening. Many, many people just disappeared and were never ever seen again. So, and then we had to leave our schools, which by itself is not bad because there were Jewish teachers, but the Nazis really wanted to get at the young people first. So trucks went to those schools, told, not the whole school, but subclasses, told the children to go on the truck. In the evening, the parents waited for the children to come home, and they never turned up. And so they went to the local police, then even to the Nazi police, to ask, where are the children? Of course, they never got an answer. Those young people, 14, 15, 16 years old, were never ever seen again. After the war, we heard that they were sent to Mauthausen. Have you heard of that camp in Austria? That was a camp where there were stone quarries, and they were just thrown down from the cliffs. Luckily, we didn't know that at the time, but nevertheless, the children were never ever seen again. After 2 years like this, about 10,000 young people, starting from 16, that was my brother Heinz and Anne's sister Margot, were that age, and many, many of their friends, and as well 20-year-old young people, got a call-up notice to be deported to Germany to work in German factories. Well, my father called us together one day and said to Heinz, we are not going to send you, but we are going to go into hiding. And I questioned, what you mean going into hiding? I know hide and seek, but what are adults going, you know, didn't get it. And my father explained, I found some wonderful people, Dutch people, mainly members of resistance, you know, all the countries who were occupied. And by 1942, Hitler had already occupied, unbelievably, the whole of Europe. And in all those countries, the measures against the Jewish people were being taken. And from all those countries, the Jews were taken to Germany and Poland, to the horrific, horrific death camps. But so my father explained, but I couldn't find one family who was going to take in 4 people because the apartments are quite small. People don't live in houses and not enough space there. And so he said, we are going to split up. I will go with mother and Heinz will go with him. And I started to cry. I didn't want to be separated. I was very, very close to my father and my brother. And my father explained, if we're in 2 different places, the chance that 2 of us will survive is much bigger. So survive. So that was the first time that I realized it's a matter of life and death. And with 13, that is not a comfortable feeling. So,
Like the Franks.
And in hiding,
Yeah.
the Germans knew that not all the people had turned up, so they made house searches. At night, they knocked on doors. Ordinary Dutch people had to open the doors. They went from street to street and searched the homes. And so we had in every hiding place a hiding place within the hiding place, meaning again, the people from the resistance came, looked over the apartment and built false partition, made the room smaller, or even in a cupboard, they made a false door so that the finish here, but there is another little room where you could hide, or sometimes even under the floorboards. And so when this knock came, we quickly had to hide there. So the nights were very, very anxious, as you can imagine. Are they going to come? Are we going to be quickly to hide there? And there was a story going around. Again, in one home, they went and looked, and there were people hiding, and the beds were still warm, because, of course, you slept in a bed. And so they demolished the whole apartment till they found the people. And the hosts were, of course, arrested as well. And when you hear these stories, all the good people where we were hiding, my father was hiding, said, you know, after a year, sometimes after a couple of months, we just can't take the tension any longer. You have to find a different hiding place. So we moved around perhaps 7 times.
Unbelievable. Like the Franks, you were eventually caught. And this obviously may be painful, but can you tell me, or tell us, what that moment was like when you knew they got you? What was that like?
It was my 15th birthday, so we had been already 2 years in hiding. And was 1944. And my father had phoned my mother. The woman where they were staying in the country is blackmailing them for more money. You know, she was a single woman. She thought the war might end soon. I would like to have a big nest egg. But if you can't go to work, like my father couldn't go, of course our reserves were swindling. We didn't have much money left. And my father said, if the war did last long, she's going to throw us out anyway. So please, we were in Amsterdam and they were in the country at that time. Find us a different hiding place. But it was already very difficult to find safe homes. Many, many people had already been arrested, even the people from the resistance. And so eventually a Dutch nurse came forward and said she knows a safe hiding place. But this nurse turned out to be a double agent. She really worked for the Nazis. So when she took my father and brother to this safe house, the Nazis came in with their own key, talked to her, and took my father and brother away. And this new hiding place, like I say, she had been in the country before, was just around the corner from where we were hiding. So on the Sunday, when they moved in there, we went to visit them. And on the Tuesday, it was my 15th birthday, we sat down to a little special birthday celebration. Our host gave us an egg, which was a rarity because food was very, very strictly rationed. And we just sat down to breakfast, and there was a knock on the door, and the Nazis stormed in, because obviously they knew where we were. And they went straight for my mother and me and took us away.
When you're on the train, I mean, we've seen the movies. What goes through your mind when you're piling on the train?
It was not train like you expect a train to be. It was, I call it good train. When I see sometimes through America, those huge, long wagons of trains, metal, without any windows, without any opening. This was how they transported us. Not even cattle would be transported in this way. There were 80 people pushed into it. There were, of course, only floorboards, nothing to sit, no straw, no blanket, nothing. There was just a little slit of air, which was of course not enough for 80 people. It was metal, so it was made, it was very, very, very hot. They put 2 buckets in, one ordinary small buckets, one for toilet facilities, can you imagine, 80 people, and the other one for clean water. Once a day, the doors were slit open and the buckets were changed, and big chunks of bread was thrown in like you would feed animals. Of course, never enough food. So people fainted, the stench was unbearable, we were all hungry, we were sweating, it was really, really, really awful. Everybody was scared. We never got any information. How long were we traveling like that? Where are we going? Nothing. Even when they opened the door, no, just Saujuden, you know, just shouting at us, terrible. And the only good thing was that it was really the last time that we were together as a family. And my father, with tears in his eyes, apologized to us, that from now on he can't protect us anymore. He said, you'll be on your own. And you know, for a family man, you can imagine that's really, really hard, that you can't look after your own family.
I was reading your book, and there was a part where your father was saying this to you, and he gave you a coat and a hat and said, this is hopefully to help protect you. And then you guys finally got off the train. What did you think was going to happen?
I just want to tell a little bit about my brother, because you can imagine, very, very special to me. He was actually a wonderful musician. In this rented apartment, there was a piano. He could compose. He could play the Rhapsody in Blue from Gershwin, very, very difficult piece by heart. You know, he had a guitar, he had an accordion, he could play any instrument. But of course, in hiding, he couldn't make any sound. You had to be quiet the whole day. And so he started to paint. And he created amazing artwork. And the last conversation I had really with him, when he told me in the cattle truck that before they fled that woman who blackmailed them, they hid the paintings under the floorboard with a note on it. This belonged to Heinz and Erich Geiringer, and after the war, he's coming to pick it up again. At that time, when they fled this woman, you know, he realized he's going to go to a safe place, the war will end soon, and in 3-4 months, he's coming to pick up the paintings.
That's fantastic.
So, as you said, eventually the train stopped, and we heard a lot of shouting and dogs barking, and the doors were slit open, and we looked around, and we realized we were in Auschwitz.
Can you possibly describe the moment you stepped off and you see Auschwitz? Do you know what's going on now? Do you kind of have an idea?
You know, in the occupied countries, you were, of course, not allowed to listen to foreign radio. There's no British radio, BBC, but the BBC said broadcast out to all the occupied countries in their own language. And the people where we were staying, usually resistance people, always listened to this radio. So they had a little bakelite radio hidden in a cupboard, and the Dutch broadcast at 9 o'clock started with da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. This is the BBC from London. You know what radio is, and well, more television. And we were glued to it, you know, listening what was happening, how was the war going. And by 1944, the Germans had already been defeated in Africa, and the Russians were already approaching. So it sounded quite optimistic, but nevertheless, they always warned. They said in Germany and Poland, there are over 300 death camps. And Auschwitz was always mentioned, that in this camp, Jewish people were systematically being gassed. So you can imagine when we realized that's where we were now, we thought, well, our end is very, very near. The next command was men and women to different sides. If you have ever been to those horrific camps, you might have seen Auschwitz was a men camps, which big barracks, but Birkenau was a women's camp. So, and then there were a few other camps. But so men and women were separate. So the next command was men and women to different sides. Can you imagine people saying goodbye to each other, assuming they will never ever see each other on this earth? My father, who was not a religious man, took me by the hands, looked at me with such sad eyes with tears running down, and he said, God will protect you. This was for me, you know, he gives me over, he has no power anymore, but he hoped that God will look after me. And it seems that he really has. And then the men walked away because we actually, that time the train went to Birkenau. And then we heard whispers, Mengele, Mengele is coming. I don't know if you have heard the name. He was a camp doctor, a youngish man of 40 years old who, properly medical doctor, but he wasn't there to cure people or help people when they were ill, but he decided who was going to die and who was going to live at arrival. So the first selection was taking place. You had mentioned the hat and coat. It was actually my mother had been given before we were taken on transport in the holding camp from a kind person because we just had the clothes we were arrested in. That was already a week afterwards. A hat and coat. And the hat had a big rim like our rabbi, a Chabad rabbi with a big hat. And it had the rim. And so when Mengele looked at me, for a fraction of a second, he decided this side or this side. He didn't realize how young I was. So this hat really saved my life. Until her dying days, my mother used to say, you remember how I saved you your life when I gave you my hat and coat? And that is true, because there were older young people than me who looked perhaps smaller or were a bit paler, were taken to the wrong side.
I'm sure there was a moment where several moments, you know, despair, you lose hope. Was there ever a moment where you just, I'm giving up, or that just was not in your?
Well, yeah, you know, I was just 15 and I was just not ready to die. So I held on, and this is what Primo Levi, another Holocaust survivor from Italy, he wrote many, many books. See if you can read them. Very, very nice, full of feeling and full of knowledge. He was a scientist. He wrote in all his books, he knew when somebody was going to die, when they had given up hope. Because your body had no strength. Body-wise, you could have died any day. Only through never ever giving up, through hope, did you have a chance. And you know, I was 15 years old. I had had a wonderful life in Austria. I wanted to have a boyfriend. I wanted to get married. I wanted to have a family. So I never ever gave up hope. But at one occasion, I mean, life was really, we went to work from early morning to late at night. We got in the morning a little mug of liquid, in the evening a chunk of bread. That's all we got every day. Washing was impossible. Even going to the toilet once a day you were taken. So we had just one garment. No underwear, no toilet paper, no spoon, nothing. And so, you know, we were not meant to live much longer. kept some people, so as I say, the transport, about half the people were killed on arrival, and the rest died, and we slept 8 in a bunk, I mean half the size of this carpet, 8 people slept there. It happened very often. You woke up in the morning and the person who slept next to you was dead. So for half the night you slept next to a dead body. And one day we were full of lice, not just head lice, but body lice. But once a week we had gone to a shower and we were deloused. And once we came out of a shower, still naked, of course, and there stood this Mengele, and the selection was taking place. So naked, we had to parade in front of him, and I passed, and my mother followed behind me, and he asked her to turn around once more, and then he sent her to the wrong side with 40 other women from our Dutch transport. And those 40 naked women walked out of the barrack and to their deaths. And that was a moment, as you can imagine, that I thought, I can't make it without my mother. You know, she couldn't help me a lot, but she did a little bit, and especially to speak courage into me. And like any mother would do, sometimes she shared her bread rations with me. She gave me a little bit of her. So this was for me the most horrible, horrible moment what could have happened in the camp. Again, it's a long story. Through a miracle she was saved, but I didn't know that for many, many months. And one day it was, you know, every day was the same. We only knew the seasons. It was perhaps November. The snow was that high. Very often when I had to run, I lost my shoes. I had big frostbite on my feet. My toes were open. They started to get infected. I thought, I really can't make it. My mother had been selected. I had no idea if my father and brother is still alive. Many of our Dutch people from the transport had been taken because the Germans knew that the Russians were approaching. But we didn't know that. We had no idea what was going on outside. But many barracks were emptied, and so most of the Dutch people I had known had gone, and they were always sitting with strange people working, and I said, well, I tried to get through the day, but it was terrible. And I was called out, and I thought, well, somebody wants me now, that's now my end. And I go outside, and there stood my father. Unbelievable. Never a man came from the men's camp and to visit, and he was with an SS man, and he told me he worked in a timber factory, and the first question I asked him, of course, how is Heinz, is he okay? He said, yes, he's still okay. And the next question from him was, where is Mutti, the mom? And I told him she had been selected and guessed. You should have seen my father. He crumpled in front of my eyes. He burst into tears, and I burst into tears. And then he got back his strength and he said, you must not give up. We are going to make it. The war is going to finish. Heinz is okay. We'll be family again. And Mutti will look after us. And he killed twice. He came again. And then I never saw him anymore. And well, the Russians were approaching, and the Germans took more and more people out. The gates were open. We could have left, but you know, we were hungry, we were cold, we had no clothes. And Poland, Polish people were not very friendly to Jewish people. So we thought if we get out, perhaps it just murder us. So we did stay. And a few Dutch people from another part of the camp came and said they'd seen my mother. And of course I didn't want to believe then. I thought she'd just want to encourage me, you know, to hold on. And they said, yes, yes, she's still alive. We have seen her. Try to go to this part of the camp. Before, this wouldn't have been possible, but many Nazis had fled already because they were very afraid of the Russians. And so eventually I was able to get to this part of the camp, and there was my mother. Indeed, she was there, very, very weak. She looked terrible, and I looked terrible, but nevertheless, we were both alive. And then we were staying there together, and one day we woke up in the morning, and there was no dog barking and no shouting, and we went outside, and the camp was deserted. The Nazis had fled.
You had several, I guess you can call miracle moments with your mom.
There were certainly a lot of miracles already happened.
I mean, it's quite unbelievable. Can you tell us a little bit about how you found out about your father and your brother, and then, of course, when Otto Frank found out about everything? Tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, I must just tell that the Russians came eventually. And but before that, we were 10 days on our own, and I decided I would go to the men's camp and try to see if my father and brother were there. And I went there. It was about 3 miles, but it took me 6 hours because I did it at night because there were fighting going on still. And I got to the men's camp, which was deserted as well by the Nazis. And I looked all over, all the barracks, and I came across somebody who looked very familiar, but I didn't quite recognize him. I just thought, I know this man. So I went to him, and I said, do I know you? He said, yes, I'm Otto Frank, Anne's father. And he looked at me as well, and he said, you are Eva Geiringer, Anne's playmate? I said, yes, yes. So, of course, he asked me, have you seen my girls or my wife? And I hadn't seen them. But he had seen my father and brother, and so I had great hope they would be okay, the war would end soon. But the war didn't end. That was January. And so the Russians took us away eastward because we couldn't go back to the west. The war was fierce fighting there. And we ended eventually, after 4 months in May, we ended up in Odessa. So right in the Ukraine. And there we waited for the end of the war. And when that came, there was, of course, great jubilation that we had made it. Otto Frank was with us through this long journey. And then we waited to get back to the West. And when that happened, then eventually in June, we ended up in Amsterdam again. And we had still nothing, no money and no clothes. And so we had just a few bundles with a few odd bits and pieces. But when we got put down there at the station, we thought we would have a welcoming committee and we would receive like heroes and people would say, how was it? And so happy you are back. Nothing. And then we heard in Holland, all the occupied countries in Europe had been freed already by the Allies. But Holland was occupied till the last day of the war. Only when the war was ended did the Germans leave. And it was called in Holland the Hunger Winter, because the Germans took everything the Dutch produced to feed their own population. Which you can understand, Germany had been bombed, there was no food, there was no heating, it was pretty terrible for the Germans as well. But there was no food whatsoever in Holland. There was no cat and dogs, they all have been eaten. Can you imagine? A farmer went to the country not a farmer, a person went to the farms to try to get some food. He came back with 1 potato to feed a family of 5. There were 10,000 people found dead in their own apartments. And then came back more people from Germany, we came through France, from different countries, refugees, and they just didn't know what to do with us. But we were lucky we were able to get into our apartment, my mother and me, because it wasn't our apartment, it belonged to a Christian person who had let us back. Otto had nowhere to go. He had to go to Miep Gies because his apartment, also people moved in, his furniture had been shipped to Germany. And so he came to us and said, you know, the only thing I possess is clothes on my body. He really had nothing. And of course, it was very anxious. We went to the station. We put adverts in the paper. Have you seen this person, that person? And eventually, Otto heard that his wife and both his girls had perished. He came to tell us that, and he looked terrible. And my mother said, well, to me, you know, at least we have each other, but this poor man has nothing in the world. And we got a letter from the Red Cross, very, very, you know, not with any feeling, just telling us that my father, calling him by name, Erich Geiringer, and your son, Heinz Geiringer, perished in Mauthausen, this horrid Austrian death camp, several days before the American army came to liberate that camp. Well, that was for us the last straw, as you can imagine. I had survived hoping that we would be again a family again. But when I realized that will never ever happen, I became very, very depressed.
You only begun telling your family story, I guess it's like 20 years. And I guess the curiosity is why did you remain silent for so long?
Well, I just have to tell in between a little story till I come to this point. Otto came very often to our house, and you know, I was full of hatred, and Otto, who had lost everybody, he had no hatred, and I couldn't get that. And he said to me, you know, if you go through life hating people, the people you hate, they won't know, but you will be a miserable person. And I can tell you I was miserable. And I didn't believe in God, because the only thing in the camp what we could do was pray to God to stop this. But he didn't. And as well, I didn't believe in humanity, because if you would have seen the cruelty of those young German men, how they could treat a human being, how they treated, you know, you think, what are we for human beings to do this? And it wasn't just 10 or 20 or 100, it were tens of thousands of people treated people worse than you would treat an animal. I could tell you stories of cruelty, unbelievable. And so I was very, very, very miserable. And Otto kept to help us. He published his diary. He got the diary, of course, from Miep Gies. And my mother helped in, and they became very friendly. And I was a very difficult teenager. I didn't want to go to school. I didn't want to help my mother with the household. I was very, very, very unhappy. And when I finished school, I didn't know what to do with myself. And Otto and my mother decided I should become a photographer. And I didn't really care. And I was still unhappy in Holland. And Otto knew somebody in England, in London, who had a photographic studio. And he arranged for me to go for 1 year to London to become a photographer. And I went, and I lived in a little boarding house where a young man from Israel had come to study economics. And we became good friends, and we went for long walks. We both didn't have any money. And after 6 months, he said to me, Eva, I've fallen in love with you. Will you marry me? And when I finished my studies, we can start a new life and go back to Israel. And I said to him, no, thank you. And he was, of course, very shocked. Why not? You don't like me? I said, yes, I do like you, but I have a widowed mother in Amsterdam. You can imagine, we were very, very close. I'm going back after this year is finished. You know, we didn't really know each other. I told him I was Dutch, which I wasn't. I was stateless. He told me, because we lost our papers, you know, and he told me he was Israeli, which he wasn't. He was a German refugee. And we didn't talk about our past. He had no idea about what had happened to each other. And then Otto Frank, who kept a bit an eye on me, came over one day, and I told him that this young man had asked me to marry him, but of course I'm going back to Mutti. And he got a bit embarrassed, and he said, well, your mother and me have fallen in love as well. And once you get settled, we like to get married. So I went back to this young man and said, you can marry me now?
Touche.
And we did, and we went back in next year, in 1952, and we got married in Amsterdam, and we were married for 62 years. And Otto and my mother were married for 27 years, and they were very, very busy with the publication of the diary all over the world. It was not a bestseller when it was published in Holland, but when it was published in America in 1952, it became an immediate bestseller. And, you know, it's been translated into 70 languages, and wherever I go, I mention the name of Anne Frank, people know who she is.
I was reading your book, and one of the several portions of the book that just was so gut-wrenching and just kind of brings you to tears was you were asked to go back several times, to go back to the camps, and no. Then you finally did, and you're just, please, if you can, describe what it was like when you both went back for the first time.
I went with my husband. In 1995, when Auschwitz, the biggest camp really, was open to the public, because it was not anymore under Russia or under Poland, the West did a big memorial service of the 50th liberation of Auschwitz. And the Dutch television, I was living in England, but the Dutch television knew, of course, about me and phoned me up and said we would like to make a program for television about what is going on there on this particularly memorable day. And could you come with us? And I said, no, I would never ever go near this place. And then we thought you would say that, but we'll give you a few days and we'll phone you back again. And I was debating it with my mother and my husband, and I said, well, I don't really want to go back there, you know, I know it, why should I go back? And then my husband said, well, you know, you live with it still. Perhaps when you go there, you can close the chapter. And as well, the Dutch television had told me some of the Russian soldiers who had liberated us would be there. And then I thought, well, perhaps I can say a proper thank you to them. And so somehow we decided we would go. But it was a really horrible experience. It was winter, of course, January. And same time as it was liberated by the Russians, the snow was cold, the snow was high, and it was not really prepared for visitors like it is now. It was still exactly how I remembered it. And my husband, as soon as he got off the car and entered this famous picture, you know, with the entrance through this tunnel, he burst into tears and he didn't stop crying. And then there was you know, all the nationalities were there, and there are some gravestones for all the different countries. And we prayed there, and my husband just cried from beginning to end. And then it was very, very cold. She said, let's go and have a hot chocolate and a cake. And my husband said, I couldn't get a crumb or drink through my mouth. You know, it was really a terrible, terrible experience. And I thought, that's it. I'll never go back again. And a few years later, a German television crew asked me to come and visit that, and for education purpose. And I gave in again. And a few years ago, you'll be surprised, a Japanese television crew said, please, please go with us. And one of my daughters really wanted to go with me there. So again, I said, we will do that. You know, well, America had a big war with Japan, of course. And I had been to Japan, actually. And they're so charming people, you know, and they wear white gloves in the taxis, and they bow to you, and they give you presents all the time. And I said, and how could they have been so cruel? But this television crew, she made me work from 6 o'clock in the morning till late at night. We were frozen. And I said, look, I can't carry on anymore. Of course you can, you know. And then we wanted to go back to Krakow, you know. We finished for the night. She said, no, we're staying in a hotel near Auschwitz. And I said, I don't want to stay near Auschwitz. Yes, you're going to stay in Auschwitz. And, you know, I had no choice. I was with them, with their car. So I had to stay in this hotel, which wasn't prepared, and it was freezing cold. And she said, well, it doesn't matter, you have a blanket. And I thought, now I understand why they were so cruel. But, you know, I got letters from Japan after they'd seen the film, such long letters, translated, of course, and full of questions and full of thank yous. And so I thought, well, it was really worthwhile to go.
We were talking backstage, and we were both sharing stories of books and movies that we've seen. And I brought up a movie, and you go, that's not what I brought up the Boy in the Striped Pajamas. Has anybody seen that? And Eva looked at me, she goes, not true. None of it's true.
Not a bit of it is true. And, you know, educators said, never use this book because it gives a completely wrong impression. But unfortunately, it is used a lot. And what they say is, well, it starts to interest children, but it doesn't give the right impression of what it really... First of all, there were no children in Auschwitz or in any of the camps. You know, children were immediately killed. That's one of the things. And then, if you remember the film, that a Jewish doctor in his striped clothes, full of lice, and perhaps he had even typhus or dysentery or something, was serving the Nazis, pouring wine in their parties when he had a dinner party. I mean, you know, they didn't come near us. That would never, ever happen. And that the children were playing chess under the electrified fence. Yeah. You know, completely ridiculous.
Does it concern you, the apparent current trend in a lot of countries in Europe, the seeming rise in anti-Semitism? And do you think it can happen again, Eva?
Well, of course, you know, when I came back from Auschwitz, I really wanted to talk to people about it. I wanted people to feel sorry for me and to know what has happened. But people didn't want to know. Everybody, Europe people everybody had suffered. And they said, we have learned our lesson, never again Auschwitz. Well, it's not Auschwitz, but there have been terrible, terrible genocides and wars and prejudice and discrimination. So we haven't really learned. So there is anti-Semitism, yes, but it is nothing compared to what has happened under Hitler time. And if you read history, anti-Semitism has been for 2,000 years, and I don't think it will ever disappear. And you might have heard that the school in Orange Country, the children were drunk, but they still had swastikas displayed and did Heil Hitler salute, and I spoke to them. And yes, we have to educate, definitely educate people about the dangers of racism and prejudice. And those children said they didn't know what it meant, which is, of course, I never believed that. But, you know, as Jews, we can cope with a swastika here and there. It shouldn't happen, but this is not real anti-Semitism. That is stupidity. So we have to educate people, because it was very hurtful for Holocaust survivors to see young people doing this, Hitler salute especially. But I don't think we have to be afraid. But we have to carry on educating the young people that it is just not acceptable anymore to have prejudice against people of a different race, especially not of a different religion. Religion is something very personal, and you know, it's you and God, and if we have this God or that God, it's all very beautiful. Religion is, in every religion is beautiful, and it is uplifting. And so why should we criticize people who pray to a different God? You know, this is really, you have to explain. In England, you have to learn all the, as I say, religion, you have to learn all the different religions. The children share the food, or the special holidays. Every school, the Hanukkah, and the Muslim, we have a lot of Muslim children. We celebrate all this, and we learn it, and we start to accepting each other. And only then will we have a peaceful world. So this is really very, very important, education. And
We got a few minutes left, I still believe so. What I have trouble trying to figure out here is going through everything you went through at such a young age, making it through it, which is mind-boggling, and of course, the people here tonight as well. How did you rebuild your life?
Well, you know, just something very personal. As I told you, I survived because I wanted to have a boyfriend, marry, have a family. And when I started to have a family, wanting to start a family, nothing happened. And then we were told that in this liquid which we got in the morning, in the camp, there was a bromide, which stopped our monthly menstruation. And so, and I was only young, 15, 16 years old. Obviously, I wasn't able to conceive, and I was shocked. And eventually, I went to a hospital, and I had a year different treatment, hormone treatment as well, and suddenly I was pregnant. And the birth of my first daughter was, for me, really a miracle. And then I had 18 months later another little daughter, and a few years later another little daughter. And, you know, and then I really realized life is beautiful. And, you know, we had a good life with my husband and my children. I've got 5 grandchildren as well now. And, you know, we are very, very lucky people. We have given a beautiful earth, beautiful continent. There's enough food for everybody. Every year that nature dies and it comes up back again. You know, it's a miracle we are living. And how can you not be happy? You know, there's so much beauty in this world. Just let's take it, but let's share it all together. And you know, America, England, Europe are very, very rich countries. And there was, last year I was in LA, and they showed me around in the business area, streets full of tents where homeless people were living, filthy and neglected. And you know, that is not necessary. We have enough money, we have enough riches, we have enough food to be able to share this with all our people in every country. So please, let's consider everybody, let's share what we have got, and never ever be prejudiced about somebody who is from a different country, from a different race, from a different religion, and don't make wars so that we get millions. There are millions of refugees who have to flee their country because it has been destroyed through bombing and through starvation and through blockades and through poisonous water and through terrible things. That is not necessary. Science is so clever now. We can really create clean water from seawater. We can feed everybody. Let's really share our wonderful world with everybody and make a peaceful, wonderful world for everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very, very much. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Eva Schloss. And before we say goodbye, can you tell everybody about your book? We got a beautiful new book.
Yes, we have a very nice book, Eva's Story, which was written in 1986, and it has become sort of a bestseller. And there's, of course, lots. I've just touched a little bit on what is written in the book. Quite a few more miracles, and as well, very interesting about our journey through Russia, and a lot of them even after the war. So they're all signed. I spent yesterday signing 500 books, so that you have all got a
So
signature.
if you don't have a book, buy a book.
So thank you for coming. It was a great pleasure to be here in this lovely city. I think I'm going to see some of you still at a special reception behind the scenes.
Yes, we have a little bit of book signing. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to go to the book signing, that'll be a little bit afterwards. But I think I speak for everybody here. It is an incredible honor for me to be here, but just for anybody that is in this building tonight to experience your story and for you to share it with us, and the fact that you have been able to survive and live your life with zest and chutzpah and everything else. We're very happy that you're with us, and thank you so very much.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Eva Schloss.
Thank you.